Welcome, my friends. Welcome, my friends and my relatives. I can say especially thank you, my friends and relatives, because my parents are here today. So I always love when they come to, it's bring your parents to work day. That always makes me very happy. Thank you all for being here. I want to welcome you all today to mark this occasion of a conferral of a posthumous honorary doctorate for Miss Cecelia Svinth Carpenter. We're going to begin with brief comments from several of my colleagues before we get there. And I just wanted to preface our intent with these is to mark this occasion by sharing the work we're doing, work that's inspired by her legacy, and our efforts to learn from and honor our history and our obligations to tribal communities. Because we know that we live on treaty land, we acknowledge that we have work to do to honor those treaties. And we acknowledge that up to now, we have not always done that work or done it well. We have much to learn and a whole lot more work to do. So this is, in sharing this work, we share it to show our accountability, to ask for you to hold us accountable, not to show how great we are by any means, but to just say, this is what we are working on and what we hope you will hold us accountable to. So with that, I want to invite my colleague, Troy Storfield, to the podium, Professor of Native American and Indigenous Studies.
Päivi ja vuodes pohtin pohkadi. Mun ammele määrähä Joanna troja datle Troy Storfield. Leen sapmelas, Norga biele Marco sapmelas. Mutu orun ja bargun Iyall ja Nisqually alapmogid govlus gaid mun mait algun gitu. Mun lein Amerika indianaid ja algo mot duktamid professor universitetas dalle. Greetings and welcome. Welcome all to these presentations in honor of Cecelia Svinth Carpenter. My name is Madaha Joanna Troye, and I am Sami. More specifically, I am Mark Sami from the Norwegian side. In introducing myself with my Sami name, I am telling you who I am according to Sami understandings. I am Maritz Joannes Troy, or Troy, the son of Joanna, who is the son of my father, who is the son of Marit, my grandmother. My colonized name is Troy Storfield, and I am also a professor of Native American and Indigenous Studies here, where I live and work with gratitude on the traditional lands of the Nisqually and Iyall peoples. I would like to especially thank and welcome the elders who have joined us today, as well as the family of Cecelia Svinth Carpenter, other members of the Nisqually and Iyall tribes, and members of other local Indigenous communities, as well as members of the general public and students, staff, and faculty from Pacific Lutheran University. It's a real honor to welcome you all to this event, an event that is long overdue at PLU, which occupies the home territory of the Sastuck village on land forcibly ceded to the United States in the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. PLU was founded on these lands by Norwegian colonizers. See, we share some history, because my people too were colonized by Norwegian settler colonizers. The Norwegians who settled here strove to transform this indigenous place into something more recognizable to them. Like most universities, PLU is a settler colonial institution, one in which Eurocentric ways of knowing are privileged, while indigenous and other philosophical and intellectual traditions struggle to exist. From my own experience, I know a little bit about the challenges that have often faced indigenous students in settler colonial universities. These are likely some of the same challenges faced by Cecelia Svinth Carpenter when she studied here. Yet she did well, and she used her education to write much of the history of the Nisqually and other native peoples of this region. I've been using her texts in my class for some time now, and my students have always responded very well to her words. In turning an education gained at a settler university into a tool to advance Indigenous interests, Cecelia Svinth Carpenter is a model for other Indigenous students and scholars, and a wonderful example of Indigenous survivance and resilience. Thank you for being here as we honor her. Ologitu Bohkadi.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Simon. I am the son of Tony and Vivian, immigrants from Hong Kong and from China. Today, I'm going to present to you a preview of a project which we have been working on in partnership with the Nisqually and the Iyall tribe. And yeah, I'm excited. So before I start, I want to talk a little bit about the process of when we decided to do this. It's something we call co-designing. And co-designing is where we started with a project where we invite not just the people who are involved in the project on the PLU side, but we also invite the people from the different communities to get involved in the creative process. So as opposed to us designing something and showing it to them, we're actually saying, let's talk about what we're trying to achieve, which is really, really cool. These are some of the partners we with on this project. South Sound Proud, the Nisqually Tribe, Iyall Tribe, Impact, which is a student media agency, and The Collective, which is an art club on campus. The location, what we're doing is we're actually we talk a lot about how when we come up to these type of events and we speak about the land, but this is a chance to show it visually in the community. So what we're doing is we are actually going to be creating a mural on the Garfield post office, which is just that way, not that way, that way, a few blocks, and super excited about that. We started on this project 2 years ago, and so we're right now at the finish line. We started meeting virtually. Some of those faces you're going to recognize. There were many, many people who got involved in this project. We started, like all things, not with visuals, but with words. We wanted to kind of understand what exactly this mural represented to the culture, to the history, to the community, and we did a word exercise. Excuse me. From that word exercise, we arrived at We Are the Land. We did a deep dive into imagery, which would be associated. Of course, cams came up quite a bit. We also looked at other installations across the country because we wanted to get an understanding of when we create something, how does this all fit into this tapestry? We had meetings. We met on our land. This was a PLU. This was at the Collective event, which Christopher Gerber led. From that, we started developing this idea of this mural. How would it come together? What would it represent? What are some of the images which we could pull from it? So we started talking about the land, the sea, the sky, the river, animals. We went to their land, which was really important. So it wasn't just PLU coming to our community, it was PLU going to their community. And I had an amazing mural there, by the way. This is the mural. This is the artwork for the mural. We have a left panel, a center panel, a right panel, again, highlighting the sustenance, the beauty, the history, the culture of what the land represents to this community. Oops. This is it on the post office. We have traditional painting, which we painted on the big, large panels, and the two panels on the windows are going to be vinyl. There will be a commemorative plaque. I'm hoping for November. I don't know how it's going to work with weather, but that is the plan. And there will be a QR code, which we will also link to a website, which has some more interpretive information regarding the mural. And of course, this type of project would not be possible without so many people. So I just want to give a shout out to the lead artist, Paige Pettibon, who was instrumental, and everybody else listed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Good afternoon, all. It's great to see you and be in your presence. My name is Lace Smith. I'm the Associate Vice President for Marketing and Communications at PLU. I'm Métis of Turtle Mountain, Chippewa, North Dakota. On my grandmother's side, Flora Zimmerman, and on my grandfather's side, I'm fifth generation Pierce County, with 4 of those born in Tacoma, William Forbes. And today I have the honor of introducing PLU's Land Stories website that Patrick is showing right over there. Patrick, would you give us a little bit of a refresh just so you can see the little animation? So we've got, you saw Paige's work from Simon's presentation. We were able to pull in Paige's work and connect it to this website, which holds some of our early campus stories. And what you see here is about 3 years in the making. And as all, or some good ideas, start off in a coffee shop, I was surrounded by good people and great conversation. So shout out to Paradise Gladstone and Nicole Giuliano. And we were just simply chatting about how can we further bring to life the land acknowledgement that PLU repeats at our different events. And that was a call from Dr. Storfeld when he wrote the white paper to how can we live further into this acknowledgement. And weave in sort of, as Paige, or Nicole and Paradise and I were talking, we wanted to weave in collected histories, indigenous scholars, alumni, current day commitments. And so we even had a conversation about Cecelia in an old Mast article that had highlighted her, and talked a little bit about Paige's work as wouldn't it be great if. And so this is 3 years in the making, but over 130 years in the telling. And I'd like to introduce you to the website. So it's plu.edu/land stories, so land-stories. And it begins with our land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that PLU's campus is located on the traditional lands of the Puyallup, Nisqually, Squaxin Island, and Steilacoom peoples. This acknowledgement informs our values and practices at PLU. We are committed to ensuring access to students from tribal communities. We are committed to offering courses in Native American and Indigenous studies, including a course on Southern Lushootseed language. We are also committed to partnering with tribal neighbors to protect and restore camas and parts of native prairie ecosystem on lower campus. And above all, we are committed to remembering the history of this land and discovering new ways to partner and honor its traditional caretakers. As Suzanne said at the top, we recognize that there is more work to be done, that our commitments are ever evolving, and we will continue to create space for our understanding to grow with them, even while we're imperfect. And you'll hear from Dan Lee in a few minutes, and he reminds us that we're all imperfect. But we must continue to connect and to be in relationship. So it's in that spirit where we took the land acknowledgement and broke it down into the sections. And so Patrick has been slowly making his way, hopefully not making you seasick, but we'll start with access and support. So this idea of recruiting and inviting and providing access to students from Indigenous communities. And as we know, it's not just to recruit and invite, but to retain and help persist to graduation. So looking at 6 different opportunities for really connecting when folks need assistance. We have a Names Are Sacred program that connects back to a foundational relationship of getting names right, slowing down, taking accountability, all the way to our Center for Diversity, Justice, and Sustainability, and our Counseling Center for Well-Being. So take a look at those, and those are a snapshot, just a small list of resources at PLU. We'll go down to the second, which is teaching and learning. So we've got 6 different focus right there. So our Native and American and Indigenous Studies program, the Southern Lushootseed. I heard a couple of murmurs about that, and I'm hoping that that's of curiosity and interest, so you can click on that. Gender, sexuality, and race studies, all the way to study away opportunities where it features Indigenous, moving into Indigenous cultures, and what does this mean, and how can we learn, And so we'll go down to the third one. We've got restoring, and there's 2 links there for a feature around the camas harvesting, and that was on the left. And we've got Angie Totis that did a video with us for a couple years back. And then also the environmental studies capstone presentation. So you can do a deeper dive in students in their own words about what they've learned while stewarding the camas fields, particularly after the golf course was decommissioned. And then our last one is around honoring. And we've got 4. So we've got our early campus stories. And Patrick, will you click that early campus story? So this is what we call a long scroll. If I were to put this together in a book, it would be about 10 pages. And so, lock in and take a look-see. It's different stories that we have in snapshots of throughout the early campus period. And so you can take a look at all the known things that we know, that we've gathered. Catherine Wiley and I created about 100 different resources, many lectures and PowerPoints and things like that brought in from and incorporated. Cynthia Iyall's presentations, I think you'll feature a couple of those. I got one of your presentations on TV and I just had to lean in. It's on Chief Leshai and just after the exoneration. So you can take a look at that. And if we go back to the main, of course, the legacy of Cecelia will be there. We'll get into the mural project. And lastly, there is some foundational documents around Lutheran values in higher education. The last one is, of course, our more work to do. That's always a commitment that we hold close, is to continuing the work. And in that spirit, I invite, if you frequent the website, to give some feedback. We're always looking for new and interesting ways to grow. Or if there's something that you'd like to call attention to, please share your thoughts. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. This is a very quiet group. Good afternoon. It's also hot in here. That's true. Yeah, as Leigh said, I often say we're all imperfect people, some of us more than others, like me. And this was supposed to be a joke. Thank you, Daniel, for laughing. Thank you. Daniel got that joke. And I highlight imperfection because I acknowledge and ask for your forgiveness that I'm the spokesperson for the project I'm about to talk about. I think there's a great level of irony that in my role at PLU, one of the jobs that gives me the most joy is bringing folks of good purpose together, folks who want to accomplish something. And part of my job is also to acknowledge the ways in which my families or the people that came before me unintentionally created the conditions that now need to be fixed today. So Leigh shared that we are all imperfect people, some of us more than others. And part of my job is not to share with you the completion of a journey, but actually the beginning of one, the one we're starting now, the one that we have begun in the last few years, and the one we invite you to walk with us. There is very little open land left in Pierce County, certainly very little native prairie left in Pierce County. In 2011, the golf course, the 9-hole golf course, which was on PLU's campus for many years, was closed. And as that golf course closed and we stopped mowing it as frequently and it started to return to a more native habitat, the plants that had been there the whole time, that survived because of our accidental stewardship, began to emerge from the roughs and from the areas that were protected by trees and the areas that were protected by weeds. And over the last 13 years, as hundreds of students from PLU and faculty and staff have worked on that land and partnered on that land and taught on that land, we've seen native plants emerge and multiply in greater and greater numbers. As Connie reminds us, the great-great-great-grandchildren of the camas that her family's harvested persist on that land today. And we've been honored to have our tribal partners harvest the camas and teach lessons to their families, to their members. It is our hope that a portion of that land continues to be that classroom, that land held and stewarded together. And under our president's leadership in the last few years, we've imagined how that entire golf course might meet multiple objectives and how it might bring both health and housing and also wholeness to this community. 3 things that Pierce County and unincorporated Pierce County need desperately. So we're at the very beginning of a journey. Lace shared some of the land story that we've learned, and part of that story is that the land was held where PLU's campus is. Part of it, that land was held in common and was used as a gathering place and a place for celebration. And part of our vision, part of our hope is that it might be that again going forward in the future. We are on a journey of learning now in which our goal is to conserve a portion of that in perpetuity through a conservation easement so that it might never be developed, so that we might rehabilitate and actually continue to replant and help the camas do what it's already doing, to grow and to thrive, to restore that native prairie. Campus partners have been in the process over the last 2 years of building a vision for that native plant conservancy and are now approaching different partners and funders to find ways to create that easement and preserve it in perpetuity. So I'm not reporting the end of a journey, but I'm reporting the beginning of one. And as Suzanne said so perfectly in the beginning, I'm sharing this because we want your accountability. We're asking for your partnership and your ideas. And I look forward to keeping this conversation alive as we continue to care for that land. So thank you for letting me provide this update. I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
If you think it's warm in here, try dressing like this. Thank you for participating with us in the good work that's happening here. We continue to honor the legacy of Cecelia Svinth Carpenter through a special conferral honoring her place in the Lute community as a distinguished alumna of the highest order. Today, it is my distinct pleasure and privilege on behalf of the university to confer an honorary degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, upon Mrs. Cecelia Svinth Carpenter. This is a defining occasion in the life of a university because so few honorary degrees are presented. They are reserved for those who fully and powerfully exemplify the core values of the university. At PLU, honorary degrees recognize worthy individuals whose lives and work advance the mission of the university. Honorary degrees are awarded to those who embody the outstanding potential of each of our students and those who have lived a life of vocation. They are reserved for those who pursued their wild and precious hopes and dreams, for those who by their singular vision and achievements make a positive impact on the world and in service to others. Cecelia Svinth Carpenter certainly met this very high standard. To help me present her honorary degree, her honorary doctorate degree, I am pleased to invite Provost Joanna Gregson to the stand.
Thank you, President Belton, and thank you, guests. It is my honor to offer comments about Cecelia Svinth Carpenter, a woman who embodied the intersection of history, education, and justice, all rooted deeply in her heritage and her relentless pursuit of truth. Cecelia Svinth was born in 1924 and raised on a farm near Roy, Washington, by her father, Reverend Hans Svinth, a Danish Lutheran pastor, and her mother, Mary, a Nisqually tribal member. She attended Chemawa Indian Boarding School in Salem, Oregon, until she returned to Pierce County to marry Marvin Carpenter and raise her family. Years later, Cecelia completed high school through a night school program at Tacoma's Lincoln High. In 1966, at the age of 42, she completed her bachelor's degree in education at Pacific Lutheran University, followed shortly thereafter by her master's degree in education. Her thesis, The Troubled Waters of Medicine Creek, explored the complexities of U.S. law and treaty rights. Cecelia taught U.S. and Washington state history at Baker Junior High and Galt Junior High in the Tacoma Public School District. It was in this role that she had the opportunity to think deeply about the curriculum being taught about Washington in Washington. These reflections inspired her to connect with the Historical Society and to write her first book about the history of the Native people of Washington state. This seminal work significantly shaped Washington's since time immemorial K-12 curriculum. Dr. Paul Sutton, a professor in PLU's School of Education, once remarked that Cecilia's impact on Washington's educational system is, quote, almost beyond comparison, as this curriculum influences how thousands of students understand the land they live on and the stories it holds. Cecilia's connection to the Nisqually Plains and Prairies was more than historical. It was personal. Her father established many of the ELCA parishes in the region, and Cecelia, as his secretary, became the meticulous keeper of records for these communities. Together, they documented everything: births, marriages, deaths. Cecelia also carefully preserved the stories of Medicine Creek families, and today, hundreds of Native families can trace their heritage thanks to her work. Ms. Annette Bullchild from the Nisqually Tribal Archives provided a powerful reflection on the lasting impact of Cecilia's work. She describes Cecilia's collection of documents, photos, and published books as a treasure for future generations of Nisqually people. Much of our history wasn't taught in public schools, Ms. Bullchild shared. So Cecilia's research is a bridge for our tribal students, ensuring they have access to their own stories in schools and college. Because she had intimate knowledge of the Nisqually Plains, it was common for real estate development companies to hire Cecelia as a consultant to ensure that sacred grounds or burial sites were not disturbed. Her son, Dean, shared that she was at the forefront of holding corporations accountable for their environmental responsibilities, including Weyerhaeuser, who hired her to guide them in understanding the damage of clear cutting and the importance of shade and tree canopies to salmon habitats. Nisqually tribal elder Cynthia Iyall also shared powerful memories of Cecilia's profound contributions to preserving and elevating Nisqually history. Cecilia's dedication to documenting our tribe's past was nothing short of extraordinary, Ms. Iyall recalled. Our history was truly at her fingertips. But Cecelia was not just a meticulous historian. She was incredibly generous. She funded many of her projects herself, driven by a desire to share her research with anyone who could benefit from it. I was in awe of her kindness, Ms. Iyall shared, and her willingness to give all the information she had on my Nisqually family. Cecelia's work wasn't just about facts and figures. It was about reconnecting people to their roots and empowering them with knowledge. One of Cecelia's most significant achievements was the exoneration of Chief Leschi, a revered Nisqually leader wrongfully executed in the 1800s. Cecelia was a major contributor in building the legal case that ultimately led to the historical court's ruling to clear his name. Cecelia's accomplishments don't end there. She authored 15 books, many of which have become benchmarks in court cases involving tribal natural resource rights. Her work is now the cornerstone of Nisqually's historical library, serving as a vital resource for legal challenges, education, and the preservation of culture. As a two-time alumna of PLU, Mrs. Cecelia Svinth Carpenter stands as an exemplar of PLU's mission and the values of Lutheran higher education in her lifelong work as an educator, historian, author, Nisqually tribal leader, and advocate for justice on behalf of the indigenous communities of Washington State. Cecelia clearly demonstrated how vocations in thoughtful inquiry, service, leadership, and care for other people, for their communities, and for the earth can inspire and educate others to live those same values well beyond one's lifetime. We will learn more about Cecelia's legacy in the next session, led by Cynthia, Iyall. Before we do so, I'd like to invite Cecelia's granddaughter, Nicole, and Nisqually tribal leader, Larry Seberg, to join me on the stage. There you are, Larry. If you could join on the stage here. Please join me in honoring Cecelia's memory and recognizing her legacy.
Thank you all so much. We are going to take just a 5-minute break so you can stretch your legs, and then our next session is going to begin. They're going to set up the stage for that, so we'll just need a few minutes. But please don't go far. Grab a drink of water if you need, but do come back within the next 5 minutes, and we will have our keynote. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm going to invite everyone to take their seats. We'll make the call to those out in the hall to come back in and join us again. I'll go wave my arms out in the hallway. I'll be right back. This is what I do in class, too. Thank you. And before we begin, I wanted to take a moment to invite any other family members of Cecelia Svinth Carpenter, if there are any other Svinths in the room who might stand so we could acknowledge you and welcome you here today. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are honored to have you here and so delighted to hold this event. Welcome. And with that, then, I would like to start our next session, and I'm going to begin by introducing the woman we've heard so much about today already, Ms. Cynthia Iyall, who will be heading up our next session. Cynthia Iyall has spent the last 30 years working in Indian country. A Tumwater High School graduate, an Oklahoma University graduate with a master's degree in Indian law, helped guide many of her goals within Nisqually tribal government. She has served 12 years on tribal council, completing a term as 5th council member, and then serving 9 consecutive years as Nisqually tribal chairwoman. During her terms, many economic projects were completed that provided a sturdy foundation for today's tribal economy, as well as creating much-needed tribal policy and law to help further the government services well into the future. She currently is the Center Administrator for Equine Assisted Services at Nisqually Tribe, working with the team to bring back horse medicine to the tribal members in a variety of ways, including equine counseling and youth programming. And she also leads the nonprofit Leshai Learning Legacy. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Good evening, everyone. We have a panel that I would like to invite Annette Bullchild. We also call her Netzie. She holds the role of our Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. So she's the keeper of our history, our official person that we go to for definitive answers, and I would love for Netzie to come up. We also had another speaker on our panel this evening, and I don't see her at the moment, and that is Connie McLeod. So she's coming back? Okay. So when she comes back, we'll help get her up here on the stage. And then lastly, we have Chris Gerber, who has been working on a special project with us. And Chris, if you would like to come up and grab a seat also. At the end of our panel discussion, we're going to have a few words from Chris introducing a really exciting project. Come on and grab a seat, guys. Is she coming? Okay, good. Good. Thank you. Are you okay if I introduce you then? Sure. Okay.
I just couldn't get that down by the way.
I know, I had to really look. All right, so what I would like to do is introduce Annette Bullchild. She's going to be our first speaker this evening, and as I had mentioned, she's our Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, or as we say, our TIPO. She's worked at Nisqually for many, many years and holds this really important position that I'm very, very happy to be a partner with at this point in time, because today, being all about Cecelia Carpenter and her work, Annette is going to share her experience in working with Cecelia.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, yes, my name is Nisqually Child. I am enrolled Nisqually, tribal member, tribal elder, but I also belong to the Puyallup, Cowlitz, Hawaiian, and Scottish. The last two are from the Hudson Bay. So on my mom's side, she comes from the Kalama family, which is the Hawaiian. On my dad's side, it's the McLeod, which comes from the Scottish on the Hudson Bay. So I've worked at the tribe for 40 plus years in different departments. My current job now is archives and TIPO. So I was with the previous council that acquired Cecelia's collection. And we met with her son, Dean, and turning all of the collection over, which is huge. And so through that, we're doing the inventory processing, but just to look at her collection, it's amazing how she acquired this, what she did to acquire all of this collection. She traveled extensively to get all of the resources. And so through that, we're going through that currently to inventory it so people will have access to it, especially for tribal members. So what it means to Nisqually tribe is getting all of the history. And a part of that, like, I know they gave, her personal background. But through that, that was her goal, was that when she taught, there wasn't enough information there about tribal people, their culture. And that was what she wanted to get out there. When she was teaching, there wasn't enough written, to tell the other side. So that was a big part of her goal. In doing that, she did come across where she found all of the connections of the families, which is very interesting because a lot of people don't realize, it's a small world and how you're related to everybody. So through that, by giving that, the tribal people learn a lot about the other side of how they're connected, all across different tribes with other tribes, but how the marriages between the Hudson Bay people created this other side of it, that is local. There's a lot of local people. So that's a part of what I've been looking at, but in her, all of her collection, it just amazes me to see some of the stuff that she acquired that I never would have thought of. I have a hard time going through it quickly because I sit there and read, and it's like a half hour later, I'm like, okay, I need to stop and get my job. But, her mind just went to places that I never would have thought of, just to find the research that she was looking for tribal people, Nisqually, but for other tribes, where she had gotten reports, where she had sent for information. So it's, I just look at it and think I would have never thought to do all of this stuff. So it really helps Nisqually in all of these areas. So she did work with a lot, like, what was read about. She went on all these cases for the tribe. She's also worked on reports that help with mitigation for everything. We've done Centralia City Light, we've done Clear Creek Hatchery, McAllister. There's been so many things that her work helped the tribe, and she consulted to make that happen. She was pretty much working for getting all this information for her books. Her husband was very supportive, decided that it was time for her to retire and that she should do the history she wanted. But in that process, as she's doing this, she consulted part-time for the tribe as they needed her. So that's where a lot of things that we did for the tribe came from her research, and she was one of those. When we went to get her collection, it was me, my husband, my son, my daughter-in-law, and we met with Dean, and we went there, and we just took a look at it, and we were just, it took us 2 trips to get to that, but, in going through it, you're just amazed at, the work she had in there, and, how much it took for us to get it out. So I always give Larry credit, Larry Seberg and Harold Mertz. They were the two elders that met with us, and we were all nervous about, legally we have to do this, we have to do that, and we're like, we are taking that, and it was to preserve and protect because that's what our job was. But it was just something to go in there, and I would say it was like a kid in a candy store. You're just looking at all of these things that you saw that you just didn't believe she had, and the maps, we're, like I said, we still go through things, and she did an extensive filing system. She had her codes, and we had to figure that out for a while. And then she did the cross-referencing. I kind of chuckled because today I was trying to make my notes, which I don't even have. But I pull out this notebook, and I'm looking at this notebook, and I'm writing my notes, and then I'm looking at it, and I kind of, like I said, I chuckled because through all of her files, that's all you see is notebook paper. At the time, everything was handwritten. And for her to do this, and her books were handwritten, you go through that, and then from there, it went to being typed. It wasn't on a computer, it wasn't a word processor. So all of the files you see, there's all this notebook paper, everything is on notebook paper. And I thought, I see why she does that, because when my kids got done with school, we ended up with all these spiral notebooks around the house, and so they're in all the rooms, and you sit there and make all these notes. But that's what reminded me, thinking of her today, was that I could see why she did that. It was just easy access, and everything she did was right, was handwritten. That's why I am in favor of them also keeping cursive writing in teaching, because, if you don't have that, how are you going to research all of these past, papers, even with the treaty, they're all handwritten, and how are you going to decipher that if you don't even know, what a Q or a written Z is, So that's, everything she did was handwritten. We also have some Adele McBride's, he's done a lot of research too for the tribe, and the same thing, it's handwritten, so you have to know how to read these and, decipher all of that. You have to get through that. So, with her thinking about the hours and hours that she spent doing a lot of this stuff and then going through it, I can only imagine, because for me to sit there and read it, it's a long, it takes a lot of time, but for her to write it, and that's like they said, this came from her heart, and it did. She was really, really, adamant about this is what she wanted to do. This was her goal. I'm really glad that, like I said, when people call me at Nisqually, I tell them, well, look at Cecelia's books, Cecelia Svinth Carpenter. I said, if you have a question, come back and I'll answer. And all I get is a thank you, because they get all the information they need on Nisqually, on, any subject they're looking at. So it's really good that the books are out there. We are in the process of republishing now that we've, acquired the rights to them, but it's the same thing. It's a long process. So we will be doing that for the schools, so they can teach about that. And hopefully it's just a start. I felt what she's done was like a spark in the fire to help others, other Indian writers, native, tribal people, you want to call them, to start writing, their history, because it is important. But you find in tribes, it's oral history, so there's a lot of things that you really have to dig into, which I know she had to, for testament. You look at all these, they had to go and sit down with elders, which we would call our ancestors now, and talk to them because they didn't know English, they didn't read or write. And so you have to go back and look into these records where they sat with them and had them give testimony of what they knew. So some of the places are different. Some of the names are different because depending, they didn't know the language. So, they would have different language. So it's really interesting to see what you get out of it when you sit here and look at all of her information. So I personally can't wait until, we're getting it digitized. Me and my son are working triple time, trying to get all this out and getting the books done. But when it comes out, it'll be really good for everybody that needs to do research to see, like I said, some of the places that she traveled to get the information she needed. She did a lot of correspondence with everybody that, would write to her. She would respond to them and help them as much as she could. But with that, they would send her things, they would send her information they had, which was very helpful to families. So she did a lot for family trees, because even people that weren't Nisqually, she would try to help them if they had any kind of connection, that she could find for them. So that's what it means to the tribe, having that. I'm just honored to have that, just to be able to see it. But like I said, it's just amazing, because I look at it sometimes and I'm like, the places she thought to go after information was you kind of have to think in her mind how she thought, how do I get there and how do I get this information? So it was really good. Coming from a teacher, I could see her system. I could see why she would go that way, but it was, just for her to do all of this stuff for Nisqually, I think was very good, and I think for other tribes, it's going to be very, very important. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Netzie. I believe our next speaker is one of our treasured elders from Puyallup tribe. Ms. Connie McLeod is a tremendous leader in everything that is related to culture. And Connie, when you're ready, maybe you'd like to share some of your story in working with Cecelia.
Apologize. That little stair step is probably too high for me to maneuver. So I'm sitting down here, I guess. My name is Connie McLeod. I'm enrolled Puyallup tribe. You just heard from Netzie. Netzie and I are first cousins. Her father and my father were brothers. My mother was from the Chehalis tribe, just south of Olympia. Her parents were Murphy and Alice Cecina, Alice Beckwith. Her grandparents were Dan Cecina and Alice Cecina. Alice was the daughter of Chief Kitsap. Alice was probably a very young teenager during the time of the Indian Wars here, where Chief Leshai and other leaders were protecting their land, their home, their place that had been their home from time immemorial, from the beginning of time. Our creation stories tell us of a time of a great flood, where people put their things together in our canoes and traveled up the river to the top of our sacred mountain. Everything that they could carry in their canoe. And when the waters receded, they returned to their villages and reestablished villages along the riverways here in the Sound and out to the Salish Sea. But Alice Kitsap was probably a very young teenager during the time of the Indian Wars. She also traveled, which meant by horseback, with her father. And at the end of the wars, her father had to protect her because of her participation in the wars, being by his side. Others that participated in the war to protect their own homelands disappeared. They were killed. Those that turned themselves in and went to the jail, they died there. Chief Leshai was hung for his participation to protect his family, his people, his land. So she was brought to Chehalis tribe and married into the Cecina family. And because she was the daughter of a chief, she was also to be married into a chief's family. And there, she lived there. She lived to be about 104 years old. My mother knew her, but she had passed away by the time I had known of her. So what our family, in reconnecting with those ties, began to research names, traditional names, family names from our different families. My father, who was also Puyallup in Nisqually. I still have a family home in Iyall. My brother lives there, and that's still my home. So when we were looking for names for some of my relatives, my sister in particular, we went to Cecelia several times, went to her home several times, and as Nancy said, you walk in and just in amazement of everything that was in her home. I didn't think about the job of removing those things. But in that research, too, the name John McLeod comes from the Hudson Bay Company. There were 3 brothers that traveled across Canada. He came down, and they were stationed. John McLeod was stationed here in Stillicum. One brother settled up towards Swinomish, and if you ever go to Northern California, Shasta area, and come across McLeod, that was another brother. They all kind of went down to California for the gold rush and then came back. Well, John McLeod had married an Indian woman also, and he has had a land settlement out here just off of Pacific Highway in front of the Bethany Lutheran Church. There's a little kiosk that says a little bit about him. And so we were gathering information about John McLeod and his wife in particular and her family. And so we were looking for information, spent time with Cecelia, and every once in a while she'd come across something about Kitsap and send that back off to us. And then if she had other information she wanted to share. And the same with my late aunt, Georgiana Couts Porgy. She had a wonderful relationship with Cecelia, and she shared a lot with us. There was other work that they, wanted to continue to work on about, the history of Nisqually and the history of the families that live there and where they all come from. I had the opportunity to be on the panel I have been on our Public Council when we were doing our land claim settlement. And one of the first objections to the land claim settlement came from an attorney representing the railroads. And his first declaration, it was, the Puyallup people no longer exist. But we fought back and we won because we do exist. But I refuse to repeat that. I very seldom repeat it because I don't want my children, I point to my granddaughter who disappeared already. I don't want them to hear that. But that was the point of the Indian Wars, taking of our land, and the murdering of our leadership. was genocide, to kill your people on purpose, remove you from your homeland, remove you from your home, remove you from your children and your family and the people that you know. It was intentional. Boarding schools were intentional by law to remove your children, which is a way to cut them off from their family, their language, their culture, all ties, and to kill the Indian. And they began with the children after they killed the adults. But that was the purpose. Kill the Indian, kill that Indian spirit in our children. So Chief Leshai was wrongfully charged in the wars against the colonists that came here, the settlers that came here. And I don't know all of the details, but Cecelia put together a panel, not only of tribal leadership, but the Supreme Court. Norm Dix was there. The Mayor of Tacoma, other leadership was there to exonerate Chief Leshai for a crime that he did not commit. Because when you're at war, you don't get charged for being a soldier. You don't get charged for doing your duty to protect your own family and your own people. But she made it happen. She made it happen. And with her leadership, it did happen. That crime is no longer a part of history. But it means a lot because our people continue to protect our treaties, to protect our sovereignty, to educate our children, to provide health care, to provide safe homes, safe places for our community. And that's all built on our history and our relationships to other people. I had the opportunity to take my first weaving lesson, wool weaving lesson, and my first vest I gave to Cecelia. I was happy she received it. Because when you see it again, you know that your first gift has a life, it has a spirit, it has a place to go, and somebody to take care of it. So that panel that made that change was important for all of our families, all of our community, but also to make a statement to the larger community that we're still here. We have survived all attempts to get rid of us. And that's the nice word for it. It allows our children to walk into places with pride, with a sense of knowing this is who I am, where I'm from, and I have a right to be here. It allows our children to face racism. And I'm glad she's not here. My 60-year-old granddaughter goes to school just down the road, Spanaway High School. And she will talk of being brown, that things aren't the same for brown kids. Punishment is not the same for brown kids. Behavior is not treated the same way for brown kids. Brown kids aren't treated the same way in school. And she's only 16 years old, and I have no idea what those experiences specifically are, but that's an attitude she carries, and that's the attitude she learned from her own personal experience. Our kids still have to survive racism, and our kids now have the opportunity to go to school anywhere they want to go to school. They have the opportunity to be able to be a part of the larger community, but yet still know who they are, where they're from. And that's a pride in identity that's come from now being able to learn and hear our language, not only in school, but at home. We can hear our songs and see our dances, which we're going to share with you this evening. We have an opportunity to eat our own food. Camas, this Camas garden didn't just appear as knowledge. I had no idea. I lived down here where my daughter lives now in Spanaway, and I drive home and there would be these blue flowers. And so one spring we said, well, let's go look. So we went into this field, and sure enough, it was camas. And there was, we finally saw a kiosk outside when we were walking out, and we're in a Pierce County Park. We're along Military Road, which is the Natchez Trail, and which is the Natchez Trail begins right here in Stillicum for the Hudson Bay Company. But I had to be 63 years old to learn that's why they came here. This already was the trade route for our Indian people. We already knew how to get over the mountain. And the white people that came just followed us, but they took it all from us. But this was a place where Indian people rested, regathered their supplies, came and gathered food. So the first time that our community had the opportunity to eat camas was in 1997, our first fish ceremony. We gathered enough camas to feed everybody that came. They might have only got 2 bulbs, but they did. So in that connection to Pierce County, they connected us to PLU. I had given a talk at a traditional foods conference, and one of the students said, you know, PLU has camas all over there in their old golf course. Check that out. So all the dots began to make sense. And now you just heard what they're going to do. But these connections are a part all of that history that doesn't get taught. And now we have an opportunity to share our history, to share it from our own people, from our own point of view, and with the truth about what it really means to have, the clear-cut attempt to commit genocide against your people. It's healing, and it's not only healing for our Native people, but it's healing for our entire communities. So thank you.
I just want to add something quick to you. I'm not sure there's a table out there about boarding schools. I advise everybody to read that boarding school initiative. That really taught me a lot. You know, it teaches you a lot about why tribes suffer with identity, why things happen in families, why, you know, we fight so hard for things. But it really is a good initiative because it gives you the whole history of what happened to tribal people. Like she's talking about, you know, there's just that everything. It just answers all the questions of to why. So that boarding school initiative is very important, and I advise anybody to read that. Also, there's always the comment about, you know, when we talk about treaty, what she's talking about was, and I always refer to it in Jerry Ekrum's book, Remember Drums. One of the things that he said in his book was the Indians did not come to the treaty or go to negotiate the treaty. They came to sign the treaty. And that was so true because the language, all of this stuff, the barriers there, they did not know, you know, when you look up a treaty, it's on, you know, you're supposed to have the same knowledge to be able to negotiate. So that treaty was not there to negotiate. The tribes and the Stevens that came, it was not to come to negotiate. You were there to sign the treaty. Leshai did get a bad call because he was, you know, he was always thought of as a war chief, and he wasn't. He wanted his people to be on the land, the prairie, the river, and, you know, he knew if they weren't, they would die. You know, that was why he fought. That's why the other Puyallup and all these other tribal leaders followed him, because they went through the same thing. Puyallup was the same way. They're like, if we don't get the place we're going to be with this treaty, we won't survive. So it was all about survival. So there's a lot of things that I tell people, read the treaty and see what was given up. You know, it wasn't just this, you know, people say, you know, oh, you have a treaty, oh, you have a reservation. But, you know, you need to really look and see what that means to what happened to the Indian people when all of this happened. So my husband, his Blackfeet, he has a hard time, he's always with me, but he has a hard time reading some of these things that he doesn't like the way tribal people are talked about, referred to, things that happen. But I tell him, read it, because you have to see what our ancestors gave up for you to be here. You know, so the Michelle Massacre, same thing, that was written by Abby Wanacott. Very hard read, you know, people don't like to read it, but you need to know what our ancestors went through in order to understand why some of these things are so important to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Netzie, and thank you so much, Connie. We really appreciate your being here this evening and sharing those amazing words in the way that you do. It's very, very special. Again, my name is Cynthia Iyall. I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with Cecelia Carpenter, which is something I will never, ever forget. And I cherish those times that I had with her. I came to realize what an absolutely amazing person she was. I had heard quite a bit about her when I was a younger person. My grandfather, Archie Iyall, used to talk about her. Sometimes they would go to the old library and she would do a class and he would debate with her. And he respected the fact that they had different opinions, but they agreed to agree that, you know, there was a way for both of them to understand and tell the story their own way. I learned a lot of my family history directly from my grandfather. I remember him taking my older brother and I, and my younger brother Tom was just a baby, to the cemetery up at Puyallup, and he pointed to that Leshai grave and he said, "That's who you are." And that was all he would say about it. Years later, during all that time, I'd wondered, you know, how exactly does that happen? How did it come to be that that's who we are? What does he mean exactly? I ended up meeting Cecelia in kind of a different way. In 1997, I was elected to 5th Council on the Nisqually Tribal Council. And I was only in it for a couple of weeks, and I got a phone call from Cecelia Carpenter. And she was one of 9 children. She wanted her sister to be enrolled very, very badly. And her sister had recently passed, but she wanted her on the rolls. So she talked to me about it, and she said, you know, we have the same mother, the same father. There's no reason why my sister shouldn't have that recognition. She wanted it very badly. I'd like you to work with me and see if we can get that done. So we brought her into council. We talked to everybody. And we were able to get her sister enrolled, which really made Cecelia happy. And it was something that was due for sure. After that, we became really good friends. And she said, you know, I know about your family too. And I said, oh, really? So I would start going to visit her in Parkland in this very tiny, quaint little 1950s home over in Parkland. And I remember going up those old stairs that she had to her front door and being greeted by this big, huge poodle. And I forgot her name, but that big poodle, and who was super sweet. Going into Cecilia's house, and Marvin was on the couch watching some game show or something fun on TV. So we go into her office, which is her kitchen area. And her kitchen table was always chock full. Stacks of paper, very organized, and she knew exactly what stack was what and what was in that stack. And always her old typewriter right in front of her. Just like Nancy said, there was no technology. It was her brain and it was her hands, either writing or typing. And she did create this incredible treasure of an archive, all with her hands and her brain, which I've always been in awe of. And I can't imagine you carrying it out, but it was pretty impressive. She was also quiet. She was gracious. She was fun. She had a curio cabinet full of frogs. She loved frogs. And I asked her, gee, how did you get all of those frogs? And she said, well, you know, I like frogs, but people keep bringing them to me, so here we go. But it was really fun to talk with her and work with her. And she would share information about how I descend from the Leschi family, which is from the Leschi and the Quaymuth. They had a sister, and I come down from them. And a few years later, I was visiting with my uncle Sherman Leschi, and we were just sitting and talking, and he said, I have a project for you. It's time to clear Leschi's name. And I had no idea how to do that, where to begin, or anything. So we ended our visit. I went home and I called Cecelia. And Cecelia said, well, yes, we need to do that. That should have been done a long time ago. And so we started meeting on a regular basis, and we put together a petition, and we had that going through the tribal centers at Nisqually and Puyallup, getting signatures of support to bring this to justice and recognize that him being called or found guilty of murder during the Puget Sound Indian War was truly an injustice. So I got to work with her on all these amazing details, and she was a bit elderly at that time, so she said, you know, I can't go out a lot. I need to help with Marvin. I can't go to meetings. I can't go do all these things. So I just became her legs. And through that whole process, I learned so much. But she was the one who had all of the written history. We learned a lot of wonderful oral history from our families, but Cecelia took it to that next step and put it on paper, and then turned it into these typed papers that were used as references all throughout for many different purposes. But she had everything. We had to go and pick a few resources to complete the picture, but she knew what to do. This was not an easy or a short process. It literally took about 5 years to bring from that request of it's time to clear Leschi's name to bringing this whole group of support together. And the amazing thing about that whole process to me was the Leschi descendants came out. And so Larry Seberg and his cousin Warren and different family members of Leschi came out in tremendous support to help bring this to reality. People from the historical community, people from the political community, people from the all the tribal communities came out to support this initiative of clearing Leshai's name. Unfortunately, Sherman had passed about 3 years into the process, but I know he was happy with the outcome. And I truly believe that this could not have happened without the work of Cecelia Carpenter, and certainly not without her voice making this happen. There was a pivotal moment about 4.5 years into this process where there was a meeting with, actually there was a luncheon in Tacoma, and some ladies were sitting and talking about it. Then Pierce County Executive Director John Ladenburg overheard the conversation and said, "I think I can help you." That second trial happened in Pierce County. The condemnation happened in Pierce County. "I think I can help you." He then brought in Chief Justice Gary Alexander. We had a meeting with Chief Justice Gary Alexander. I went to pick up Cecelia. We go to the Capitol. At that point, Billy Frank joined in one of our meetings, and Chief Justice says, "Well, I think we could work on a pardon." Cecelia, who had her notebook and all these notes there, folded everything up, stood up, grabbed her jacket, and she starts walking out the door. And I kind of freak out there a little bit because I'm not sure what she's wanting. But she literally left, and I was her ride, so I was going. But she said very clearly, just before she walked out the door, "We're not accepting a pardon. We will only go for an exoneration, and here's why." And she explained to Chief Justice Alexander why. And there were a couple of more meetings with him. She brought supporting materials to make the case, and her materials were excellent and convinced this man, who wanted to honor his ancestors and the decision that they made to find Leshai guilty way back in the 1850s. He decided that he would create this historical court, and to my knowledge, that's really the only historical court that I've ever heard of. It brought attention around the world and news all over on what was happening. But there was a third trial for Leshai, and if you know that story, which is a long story, but it's so interesting, and as Connie was saying, you know, he had a trial that ended in a hung jury, and then he had a trial where he was found guilty, and he was hung for murder of a soldier during the Puget Sound Indian War, during one of the skirmishes. There was a mountain of evidence in that first trial, including a map by Lieutenant Couts of the regular Army, who said, showed the measurements in chains that just showed there's no way that Leshai could have been at this point where there were witnesses that he was here. There's no way he could have made it over here and killed that soldier. There was all kinds of evidence about that. During this historical court, which was held at the Washington State Historical Society in Tacoma, it was incredible. The emotions were so high because it was not a give me situation. It was a true court. Connie was one of the star witnesses on that. Cecelia gave tremendous testimony on that. Several others did as well. There was, of course, the side that was for Governor Stevens and the soldier that was killed, A.B. Moses. There was actually descendants of both of those two men there, and there was testimony on that behalf. It was a full day of trial, and at the very end of that trial, there was a unanimous decision by that hand-picked tribunal of Chief Justice Gary Alexander to exonerate Chief Leshai. And I truly give 1,000% credit to Cecelia Carpenter for the work that she had done, for help lifting all of us up to be able to help do this work and get her to where we could get this all done, for bringing all of us together, all of us that are related to Leshai or somehow related under Medicine Creek Nation, brought us all together for that moment and truly allowed the sky to open up again, and that shining star that Leshai was born under, allowing that star to come out and just bringing a very good feeling of healing to the people. It was such an important thing. And even though she did a lot, I think she wrote like 14 or 15 books, and she did so much research and was witness in so many court cases and other subjects. To me, it is amazing that she did this. And, you know, she had challenged me at that time. She said, you know, this was quite an effort, and I'm going to challenge you to write the last chapter of what happened here. So, you know, I've never forgotten that. And the learning experience that I had with her on that is something that I'm going to put on paper, and I'm hoping that that will become a part of the curriculum on that timeline. And I'm so pleased that there's so many educators that are here today that are willing to help get this story out. So that is my story in working with Cecelia. I do want to recognize all of the educators who came out today who are supporting our efforts on this. I want to recognize all of our Leschi family, Larry and Warren and their lovely wives, and I think there's a few others that may be here as well. I do want to say thank you to Netzi and Chris, who will speak next, for coming out. And Connie, a special thank you for you to come out and talk with us today. I would like to recognize a couple of people just very quickly. I would like to just share that I've come out a couple of times and shared the Leschi history here at PLU. And there was one very special student who took that lesson and turned it into her capstone and did some wonderful social media for this event for us. And Sigourney, if maybe you might just stand up for a moment or just wave. She was just fantastic. Thank you, Sigourney, for all your support on the whole story and Cecilia's work. I'd like to thank Dr. Bridget Yaden for all of your support. You were one of the people coming out to Nisqually and saying, hey, man, let's work together. Merritt Trelstad, of course, oh my gosh, fun. And this turned out to be amazing. She's still laughing. Suzanne Crawford O'Brien, just love working with you and Lace and everybody else. And lastly, I'm going to turn this over to Christopher Gerber. And he is an artist that has joined us, and he's doing something special in relationship to Cecelia. So I'm going to pass it on to you to talk about that, and then I'm going to have one final comment.
Can I just for a minute, I'd like to recognize, I know there's a lot of Svinths out there. Do you guys mind standing up, who's in the room, the families? Because I know it's hard, you know, with the family trees. Thank you. Yes, you know. Thank you for coming. And I do have one story. It's real quick. Sorry, I do this. In reading Cecilia's stuff, that was one of the things. So I don't know if a lot of people know this. Her name is Hope Cecelia, you know. And in one of the papers I found, it was saying that she asked her mom why she named her Hope, and she says, "Because I hoped you were the last one." I love that story.
Hello. My name is Christopher Gerber. Do we have a slide of the sketch available? I was asked to do a portrait of Cecelia. This is just like a really rough sketch. And, you know, like portraits, when we think of portraits, we think of like one person sitting there looking at the, you know, at the viewer. And, you know, what came to mind with like learning about Cecelia is that, well, there's a Zen koan that's, what is your face before you were born, right? What is your face before you were born? It's not, it's beyond a face. And, you know, when thinking about this and talking with Netzi and talking with Larry Seberg and different elders and learning and diving deep into the writings that she did, like I I'm an outsider. I moved out here from I studied art in Chicago and moved out here 30 years ago. And when I moved out here, I was like, who lived here before? And I couldn't find out. I'm like, what was the art of the people? And I couldn't find out. And finally, someone, I started working with, painting murals with Nisqually youth, and I was given a book about Chief Leschi written by Cecelia Carpenter, and I'm like, wow, why doesn't anybody know this story? I have been asking so many people, and so many people didn't know. And I found it was fascinating, and the more I read, the more I was fascinated, the more I was just in awe. And so, asked to do this portrait, I'm like, okay, this has to go beyond the portrait. This has to show someone who reaches through time, not only back into history, and on the side there's just like really rough sketches. Just like I said, this is super rough. And there might be another slide that kind of shows my photo references. Here we go. Her matrilineal lineage, her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother, her great-great-grandmother, all were part of doing this writing. So I wanted to represent that. I wanted to represent different members, not only Leschi, not only Equine, not only Billy Frank, but different members throughout that history. Because like I said, she goes beyond time, not only back into the past, but for 7 generations into the future. Her work will be read and knowledge will be carried on and people will get inspired and have awe. And so we'll be doing this painting on copper, a big copper panel. Not only is it beautiful, not only is it culturally significant, but it also will last forever. It's archival. This is a painting that's made to last. And for me, the most important part about this painting is what's surrounding the painting. Sometimes, we go into museums and we see frames or, maybe mats, around a painting. This painting will have a background of Nisqually art, of cedar weaving, of different art done by Nisqually artists. So, again, I'm honored to be able to work, and this will be right down the hall here. You'll see a big framed-in area, and PLU has offered to give that space to this painting. And hopefully there'll be many more people who are inspired to go, oh, wow, with just my pen, with just paper, I can make a huge, huge difference.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Netzie, maybe you can help me with this last little bit here. Lastly, I would like to recognize somebody who really made everything possible and who's been such a great partner. President Alan Belton, maybe you could come up for just a moment. We brought a gift from the tribe that's got some different medicines in here for your office. So we'd like to give you that. And then Netzie here. Questions at all, or you good? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our speakers. And in your home, you're welcome all the time to come and eat, and it's open and available to everyone here. Please, for free, of course, because it's home. So please, if you don't have a ticket already for dinner, there's tickets for dinner out at the welcome station there. And And we'll see you outside. Luckily, it looks like the weather is going to cooperate with us, but of course it would. And so we'll be outside in a little bit for drum and jam session hosted and offered. Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't know. If you have a ticket for the Regency room, that's just a seating place for family of Cecelia Svinth Carpenter, for speakers and for elders. Otherwise, we have a lot of students and hosts who are willing to show you through the commons, which is right to your left.